Any questions? All right, I know, write it down. All right, so here we go. And now I'm going to have to read it very clearly because we want to have all these recorded for the recordings on the online. So would you prefer that the letter of intent responses be added to the template, or would it be acceptable to remove the question prompts in order to have more space? You can move the question. I saved it. That was the easiest question first. You can remove the question prompts. We know which number links to which, so just make sure you have the right number, and we can figure it out. Thank you. And first 5 staff back there, feel free to jump in if I'm wrong and I need these questions or you want to add more. Okay, can you say more about when, how often performance data will be collected, analyzed, stored, or shared, sorry. Also, let's see, how large is the scope of workload? I can't read that word. I guess I'm assuming, how long is that? How large? I don't know what that word is.
How long is the scope of workload?
Oh, thanks. Thank you. How long? That's what I thought it was. Okay, thanks. I do too. Usually I can read other people's sloppy writing. So we don't know all the answers to that data question right now, so I can't answer the full scope. But hopefully we provided enough context in the RFP that it will be a workload. That's why we wanted to have some staff dedicated to evaluation. So it can't just be like kind of an, oh yeah, we got to do those surveys, or we got to write in the data. Like it is really part of it. So but we don't know the exact, at this point, like number of hours it will take or number of meetings or anything like that. Does that answer your question? Sort of. You wanted more parameters. Okay. Can we collaborate with providers outside of Alameda County, such as Contra Costa? Good question. So, sure, as long as the services are provided at your site. That makes sense? Yeah. So we don't want, obviously, like sending your families to one of the first 5 Contra Costa family centers, you know, oh, our partnership is out in Antioch, so they can do their play group out there, something like that. That wouldn't make sense, obviously. But if you want to bring someone that does really, you know, a service really well into Alameda County to provide it at your site, you can do that. Is there a limit to how many partners we can collaborate with? I mean,
yes.
I mean, we don't have a specified limit, but you probably want to think realistically about what you can manage and what makes sense for your neighborhood and what you're trying to do. So the collaborative should obviously match the needs that you're trying to, you know, reach within your community. Did I answer? I'm not sure who answered these questions, but maybe just jump in if I didn't answer your question. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. This is a very good question. Can we distinguish agencies that are applying to implement the Neighborhoods Ready for School model from those that would like to partner or subcontract? Yeah, this is kind of a tricky one. So what we would like to do at the end of this, we have a list of everyone that was in this room. So one way that we're going to try to help with this is if everyone is okay with it, we'd like to send out the email and the list of all the agencies and partners and everyone that's in this room. But if you don't want to be on that list, please find Liz and Karen, raise your hands over here, and tell them that you don't want to be on the list, if you don't want to be included. But we will send out all those contacts. The other way that we're going to try to help with this, does everyone understand the question? It looks like, so this is like, how do you distinguish between the host organizations and agencies and maybe those that are subcontracting or coming in as partners? The other way that we want to do that is once the 8 have been identified through the LOI process, we can reach out as first 5 to identify some of those potential subcontractors to see, so we can do a bit of matchmaking, is what I'm trying to say, but that wouldn't happen until after the LOI and we've identified those 8 that are going to move forward to the RFP. Did I answer that? Is that right? Okay. Great. Does first 5 prefer that applicants choose only one of the high priority zip codes, or would it also be competitive to propose serving several of the 9 priority zip codes? I think that would be very difficult to serve neighborhoods all across the county with this amount of funding, with what we're asking for. I mean, if you have that ability to do that, I mean, we're not going to say that's not allowed, but it's really, the intent of this funding is to have it focused in one neighborhood and to make it a real one-stop shop and just awesome for that one neighborhood. So it's kind of a tricky question because it kind of depends on what your host organization is already doing, but hopefully I answered your question. So if you spread everything out across 9 zip codes, that's not going to make your application more competitive. I think that's what the question is.
I have a question that's kind of piggybacking off that question. I didn't ask that question, but what if you're not sure, like you're looking at space in a couple of the different priority zip codes and you say, I might be interested in space over here or over here or over here instead of like all 3.
Oh.
So what is that? Could you say I'm interested in target 3 zip codes?
I mean, I think, I'm just going to answer. Can I just, Carly, do you want to jump in? You want me to? Okay, that's a good question. So I think what the spirit of this application process is really trying to look at host organizations that really understand that community and priority population within that neighborhood. So the more that you can really describe the specific populations and what's happening in that particular community, I think the better. And so if you're kind of spreading your, what you include in your LOI across 3 different neighborhoods, I don't think it might be harder for you to really talk specifically about what's happening there. Does that answer your question? So we're not going to say, no, you can't do that, but it might be more challenging for you to do that.
I have a related question. Is it?
Oh, thanks, Beth.
Is it working? Where's the other one?
I guess it's working. Does it strengthen the application, do you think, maybe a little subjective, to serve the entire zip code, or should it be like more intensive in a smaller, or is this just one of those judgment calls that we have to make?
That's a good question. So I'm going to save those. I'm going to get through the cards, and then, so anyway, but I'll answer your question. So I'm going to answer the question. Hold on, I'm trying to think quick. So again, what we want to do is base your vision and approach on the population. So if your population and approach is really targeting a very underserved population that has historically not received a lot of programs and services for many years, and there's a lot of need, then maybe you won't serve the entire zip code. If you're trying to work with a population that is not like that, then you could maybe spread out a little bit more. But we're not telling you exactly what census tracts, how many people that you need to be working with. And I can't say if either one will be more competitive, but competitive does look like you know your neighborhood, you know your community and population, and the kinds of programs and services they might need. Does that answer your question? So it is a little nuanced.
And we want you to really be clear about it. You're telling us the neighborhood that you can realistically and fully serve with the amount of time and the amount of money that you have. So if you take something like 94605 and say, I'm going to serve the entire zip code, you may very well be able to. But you think about what we're trying to do in the scope of this work, the amount of time you have and the amount of money. You need to match your vision to those parameters. That's what we can tell you.
That's all.
Okay, another good question around match. What do you consider a match? Another grant, example, Berkeley,
Kindergarten readiness.
Thank you, kindergarten readiness.
2020.
Okay. Yes, you can use another grant as a match. Yes. Okay. To what extent can we cite or build upon work for which we have received from First 5 Alameda funding in the past? If need remains and continues to fall squarely within grant goals. Okay, I'll answer that first question first. I mean, you can cite the work that you've done in the past. I think if it makes sense when you're talking about your experience and your vision, I think that's fine. You can do that. Will organizations who are partnering with other previously First 5 Alameda funded organizations be at an advantage? No, I mean no. So we're really going to be reading these applications for the questions that are in there, but we won't be giving more points automatically for those that have had, partnering with other organizations in the past that have received first five element county funding. Yep, okay. Did I answer your question real quick?
I had a question, a follow-up question to the previous question about the
Okay.
match.
Oh, okay.
And I'm talking pretty loud. What else qualifies as matches? So if we had in-kind services, would that be something that would qualify as matches?
Yes, that would qualify. Okay. Oh, no. I think that was, I like screwed up my cards. I lost track. Okay. I think I got through them all. Yep, that's all. Okay.
From the first step.
No, just the first stack. No. Carla's next, and then we're going to open it up. Okay. Carla, you're up. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm the one that submitted a
Oh.
question about the zip codes.
Oh, okay. The one about like spread?
Yes, so YEP provides employment, and we also work with Alameda County Office of Ed to provide school and education. So I understand it being a place-based strategy in terms of offering the services in one locale. But I guess the question is more about checking eligibility of the folks receiving services based on where they live. So does that make sense? Especially with the young people that we work with who are young parents, they often don't necessarily go to school or work in the neighborhoods where they live. And so do we need to say that we are only providing services to folks in 94601, whereas we get students from all over Oakland who are going to school and working together? So it's like, can we be creative in how we think about how we're building that neighborhood or community? Or is it specific to checking where they live?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. I think it kind of depends. It's a kind of a longer maybe conversation about what the approach looks like. But I would say that we're not going to just restrict, the services that you're providing in that site to only those people that live in that neighborhood. But it is really a vision for a neighborhood prior. Yeah, like we really want to see that you know what's going on in that community. That you know where the churches are, you know where the schools are, you know where the early care and education providers are. You're partnering with those folks, you're bringing them together. They know what's available. And if you're focused on providing services across the entire county, and you're not really linking folks that are coming into your site to all those community supports, then you're not really doing what this model is intended to do. Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
And I would just add, I think you would probably also be a great partner perhaps for people to have that.
Sure.
For some places where you do have a strategy already, and we can workforce and families, economic self-sufficiency is a real driver, but people would probably want to talk with you about how you're doing that. Perhaps that's another way to bring you your partner. Thank you.
Can you remind people where you're from?
Yes, Youth Employment Partnership. Youth Employment Partnership, YEP.
Okay, the next deck of questions. There's an ask for family navigation. What is the expectation or support for connections to existing systems such as Health and Grower 211? Again, great question. As part of our capacity building role, that will be part of what we look to you to find out what are the things that you either need or feel you are missing around system integration, system partnerships, and First Five would need to be responsible for helping to make those linkages for you, or that becomes a policy issue if there are difficulties or challenges and barriers that aren't allowing that to happen. So we will need to use our partnerships and resources to help you make those connections. But any First Five strategy connecting to that, like Health and Grow, is automatic. Okay. You stated the first funding cycle is for infrastructure development. How do you imagine there would be enough funding to hire 3 FTEs and support things like facility development, stipends for families, etc.? Good question. Again, that is partially why we're asking you to think about how do you right-size your vision and look at what resources you already have as a lead agency of collaborative. We are hoping you're going to have resources already, that you're going to have some of these in place, and that's also where match comes in. So yes, 470, a lot of money, but not a lot of money. So you have to think about how you do this work. Can one of the 3 FTEs be staff dedicated to this and other projects? If one of the three FTEs is funded by first buy, no, you cannot, that would be supplementation. If they are on this budget, on this project, their scope of work needs to be for this project. If you're providing that person from another project who was formerly, read our supplementation rules, they are in the proposal, but if they're already 100% on another project and you take them off to work on this project, that also is supplementation. So if they're 100% dedicated to this project, they're 100% dedicated to this project. If you have people that you're piecing together and they're doing some job share, we would look at that. But really make sure you understand our rules around how funding staff votes. All right. They're like the accounting firm on the. Oh, I know. Is the budget to be included in the LOI? If so, what level of detail is expected, desired? No. No, not for the LOI. Remember, look at your RFP. Then it says, if there's a question about budget later about how much is the budget really. Is it 470 with the match or is it 470 plus the match? Ultimately, your budget is the base funding of 470 from us and your 20% match. So your total budget, which you will show if you get to the next phase, would be the 560 plus. Clear? You guys are really good. Can you have a decentralized model if you are applying for 2 connecting neighborhoods with great coordination, i.e. more than one location where people for coordinated information services? I'm not quite sure I understand that, but decentralized kind of goes against what we've been talking about, that we want to have deep investments co-located, housed in a neighborhood. So if you're doing it in 2 different places and people have to go between 2 different places to get what they need, I'm not quite sure how that.
So that was my question, and that's what I'm getting at is,
if you are applying for 2 zip codes where families go back and forth, could you have a model where it's more like a hub model where families can go for similar information but closer to where they reside? So it could be at a school, it could be at a health center, it could be at, if they can get the same information at all these different locations.
I don't, it doesn't sound, I mean, it does, I hear what you're saying, but we're trying to say if the person has to figure out where they need to go to get what they need, again, that kind of goes against, we're saying that they go to one place and they get all of the different components of that model that Lisa shared
Right,
earlier.
but what if it's hard to get to one place because, you know, like you might be more connected to a school, you might be more connected to your health center.
They would be a part of your collaborative, right, that you would be centralizing those.
Right, so you really want this to be like a family resource center, one location model.
That's what we're doing. Oh, and you have the second part. Letters of commitment and MOU for all partners, even if not receiving funding, yes. Because you're still a part of making sure that this model takes place in the community. So in spirit and in their effort and resources they're going to give in some kind of way, we need to make sure they're on board. Okay, 2 more and then we'll open it up. My organization has 2 community hubs, both in high priority zip codes. Can we apply for more than one LOI? Yes. If you apply and identify a site where you will build out an FRC, can you also carry out that work using your grant, funding at another site within the something zip code? We would have to look, perhaps. I mean, it kind of depends on what that would be a match, first of all, right? We'd have to consider what the scope is and what amount you're going to be putting forth and if it aligns with the model that you're putting through. So I don't know, yes or no, frankly, with this one. It's something that we have to look at afterwards. Okay, those are the cards that we got. Are there others from the floor or things that people have thought about hearing or responses that now almost? Yes.
Does the 20% match have
Sorry,
to come
we're filming, so we have to use the microphone, even if you have a loud voice. Sorry.
Does the 20% match have to come from one single funder? Can it be from 2 or 3 sources?
Oh, sorry. Does the 20% match have to come from one funder? Again, that's the beauty of the collaboration, because we're going to be asking you to detail out where the match, the form of the match and the amount of the match.
I just have a question about just a little bit on the FTE. Are you looking for 3 FTE? Can that be a mix of different staff members, or does it need to be 3 individual people?
Yes, as long as you're not, again, if the staff is already full-time, already employed full-time, you can't pull them off, right? And now have them work on the first funder initiative. If you believe that by having a composite of 3 FTEs, that you can still get the kind of work that Lisa outlined in the model done to fidelity to the model, and you feel comfortable that that could happen, you could come up with a model that has 6 people doing various activities. One area, for example, when you do outreach and you want to be culturally and linguistically appropriate, sometimes you need to have several people, for example, maybe, who are doing outreach because you're going to be targeting certain kinds of communities. But for administrative and coordination, I mean, I guess you can make a case for it.
I just have one more. I think you made it clear, but just as part of this work, it's really deep investment in one neighborhood, and at this time, is there not an interest to look at what's working and potentially scaling or doing some planning process in another neighborhood?
From the first 5%. So for the, I think that's a policy conversation, right?
So let me understand your question. If you're already doing some work that has demonstrated impact and success, would we want to take that model and then use it in a different priority area?
Yeah, so some of the work we're doing in one neighborhood, we're underway with that, we're already in implementation process, but as part of this grant, we would also like to take the time to think about bringing this work to another neighborhood, and so would that be a part, so we'd be looking at both implementation and some planning.
Yeah. Okay. As long as it's in those, it can be anywhere again, but the priority zips, of course, would be in precedence.
But again, as you spread across neighborhoods, the intent is really to have all of that, just come back to those components. As long as you can have all of those components in your one target neighborhood, and you're still able to do all that and then move to another neighborhood, that's okay. But you need to make sure that, otherwise it won't be as competitive if you're like spread across, you have a little bit of this over there, a little bit of this here. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Romy? Yeah. Okay.
So I'm trying to see if I understand your model, because I'm having to change my whole thinking right now in terms of what we thought we were going to do. So in your response to that question, are you saying if you have sort of a neighborhood-based model and design in one neighborhood and you believe you could replicate it in another neighborhood, you could go in for 2 zip codes with 2 different locations where services would be centered?
We answered that question before. Somebody said, could we submit 2 LOIs, and you can't.
No, I don't mean to.
I know what you mean.
I mean, in other words, the question that I asked, which was more of like a family hub thing, you said no. But now, based on her question, what I'm trying to figure out is if you are, because you said innovative ideas, so if you're attached to 2 zip codes because they're connected and families kind of move back and forth, could you have 2 locations where you are offering these services, one in each zip code, but very similar services and a very similar model based on how you're developing your parent involvement and all of those kinds of things?
So I think the answer to that question is you could do that. I think I already answered. Someone else asked a similar question, but it would be, you could do that, but that would mean that you would need a collaborative in that one neighborhood, you would need a family navigation, you would need all those components, a facility that offers everything I talked about. in that neighborhood, and you would need the same thing in that other neighborhood.
We do too.
So which would be, you know, a lot with I think, with the amount of funding, but it depends on.
Unless there's already a skeleton for that already.
With that
exists in the
infrastructure
neighborhood.
that's really strong, and you can
Yeah.
actually talk about that.
And you're just
every
building
day
on that.
In the
Thank you.
LOI and RFP. Is that?
Hi, my card must have got lost, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I'm trying to remember them all. Okay, so first question was, is the intent to cover all the priority areas, or is there a possibility that, for instance, 2 applications in one area could get funded and one area could get left out?
That is a good question. It's a possibility. I think, again, those are the, we're not saying that with the money that we have, particularly given that we can only fund up to 4, and we have 9 zip codes, that there are going to be some who are left out. Whether or not we would fund more than 1 in 1 zip depends on the strength and competitiveness of the application. But also we're making decisions based on, of course, scoring. We're looking at geographic distribution. We're looking at area populations and some balance. So at the end of the day, we're not sure where they'll be, but just by virtue of how much money and the spread, some zips may not get.
Also, can an organization be the lead on one application and a subcontractor on another?
I mean, technically, yes, but again, think about the amount of work that would take, but yes, you can totally do that.
Oh, so you just have to be ready to do both.
And that's where the MOUs and the letters of agreement are really important, because you will spell out the terms of what it means to be, of course, if you're the lead, you're going to be holding all those agreements. And if you're a sub, then your lead is going to make sure that you're going to comply with what you said how you participate in that collaboration.
And then my last question was about, it probably has to do with match documentation. So could the match come from multiple partners, and if so, who's sort of responsible for vetting or verifying those funds?
It can come from multiple sources, as we've said, the match. In terms of verifying that, that's something that we would do. In terms of verifying the match and where that's coming from, that's something we would do during contract negotiations. So sometime in spring.
But the lead would be working out of the first 5 rather than first 5, directly working with each sub on their match.
Correct.
Contribution. Okay, thank you.
Is there a limit to how many subcontract relationships you can be in? I'll repeat the question.
Thank you.
So my question is related to being a subcontractor to an agency. Is there a limit to how many agencies you can subcontract for if you're providing the same services? You're just doing it for
Many different people.
many different people.
So, is the limit. I think, again, it's about capacity issue. So thinking about, again, what your bandwidth is, what your content expertise is, and what you're already doing, and how far do you think you can sort of stretch what you do. And so it's really about the relationship with the leads, ultimately, that you have, what they would require of you. And if you're feeling and they feel that you can realistically, consistently do the work, you all make that decision.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, so you got, again,
Rome's got
maybe this is way
Maybe this is too soon, and it's more when you make it past the next step. When you say up to 470,000, is that, I guess, is that guaranteed up to like 470,000, or, you know, just, I think, starting to think about these partnerships and what would be really the amount is, if we think about, and I think this will help support the vision and think about staffing plans and those things, should we be thinking at $470,000 per neighborhood? It's the up to, I think that was my question.
I think the up to is going to be, yes, I think you should plan for that, but also just realize that if you are successful throughout the process, there is a contract negotiation process where we have to look at budget, vision, bid, match, resources, and so there could be some right sizing. But I think in terms of what we said, 470 plus the 20% match is what you should be aligning your vision. Okay.
Oh, wait, one more question.
Hi, I'm Molly from Tandem, and I know many people in the room, and we're partners with many of the organizations in this room, but I just want to extend our support and potential partnership on these to anybody that we don't know. We do early literacy and language development and kindergarten readiness and parent leadership programming, and have been a partner of First Five for a long time. So if you don't know us and you want to, we're here.
Any other questions? Because we have parents going to, thank you, Molly, because you've modeled what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Karen?
So we were able to end a little bit early, and we'd like to encourage you all to talk to each other to find out if you're planning on being a lead agency or one of the partner agencies, to find people you might be able to coordinate with, and to use this time passing out your cards and getting contact information. And we will share the sign-in sheet as well. And if you don't want your name to be shared, come find Liz. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you so much.